Welcome to the Health Ranger Report here on Brighteon.tv. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. Today we've got a new guest for you, someone who's been putting out some truly fascinating information that's going to blow your mind. I guarantee it. His name is Ben Davidson, and he's with Suspicious Observers. That's the YouTube channel. That's also his website, suspiciousobservers.org. And he's an expert in solar cycles and the influence of what's happening with the sun and space weather events on human civilization. So right away, you know this is going to get really interesting. The rise and fall of human civilizations. And what are we looking at right now? What about crop yields and the grand solar minimum and all these other issues? Space weather. We are in a giant cosmic pinball machine firing all kinds of strange things at our planet constantly. What's going to happen? We're going to get those answers and much more from Ben Davidson straight ahead. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break with that interview and a very intriguing discussion. All right, welcome back, folks. This is the Health Ranger Report here on Brighteon.tv, and we're now joined by Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers. That's the YouTube channel. Ben, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on.
It is definitely a pleasure to be here, sir. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. You know, we scheduled this with you, it seems like a month and a half ago. You are putting out some incredible information, but since this is the first time that we've been able to interview you, and again, thank you for your time, give us an overview. What does Suspicious Observers really cover and focus on?
Suspicious Observers focuses on centrally space weather, which is what the sun is doing to the Earth in terms of solar flares, solar wind, and the magnetic fields that are powerful enough to go out past Pluto. So when those hit the Earth, they also matter. How that interacts with Earth's magnetic field and how all of these interactions can affect the weather, earthquakes, our technological civilization, and human health. And how over long cycles, there are, slight modulations to very severe punctuated events that have a pretty significant impact on the entirety of the biosphere, which would just be the living Earth, so to speak, the creatures here.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And if you don't mind me saying just a personal comment, listening to you talk and watching some of your videos, am I right in saying that as a youngster, you were bored out of your mind in school?
I was largely bored outside of math class, where I was usually with kids 2 or 3 years older than me, and I loved math.
I'm picking this up. Yeah. See, so like your mind is working at a speed that is far beyond like the typical average person. And I know you had to be bored in school, and so you were probably, as a young kid, were you like reading all these other science books and you tried to talk to other kids and they were like, what are you talking about? Did that happen to you too?
What you are talking about and recognizing to some degree really didn't happen until I took a speed reading course. That's almost like cheating at life. And I have a very mild form of hyperthymesia. The severe forms of hyperthymesia would be like, hey, 17 years ago, 2 months and 6 days, I read this book called blah, blah, blah. And on page 211, the 15th word was,
right.
No, I don't have a severe form. But anything that's impactful, that matters, that isn't just a trivial minutia aspect of the day, I'll remember forever. And when you're a speed reader, that's definitely cheating at life.
Exactly. And so what this has enabled you to do, obviously, is to assemble a lot of data points over a very broad spectrum of information coming in about your specialty, which is solar weather. But I just wanted to point out that you are I can tell you're a very high IQ individual. You assimilate data and then you're able to reach conclusions, and you're doing so from a point of view that is not tied to some institute or some university or NASA or anything like that. I mean, you are your own thinker, correct?
I can say that at this point, I have made some judgments based on the years, based on, the decades and the thousands of papers I've read. So like I have a definitive opinion on things like climate change, on long-term cycles of disaster on the planet. And so from that perspective, I do take a side on some aspects, but in terms of, I never have to read a script. I never have to wear a muzzle. No institute or department is ever telling me what to do. I don't take any kind of funding or grants, from the government or other institutes like that. No, nothing like that. But I have certainly made up my mind on several scientific issues over the last decade.
Let me ask you this question up front. What is the biggest shocking conclusion that you've come to that most people are not aware of and that the mainstream scientific community is really not talking about?
What's happening right now with Earth's magnetic field is going to combine with what the sun is doing to probably within our lifetimes trigger an event on this planet that traditionally has caused several extinctions of larger mammal species and generally takes out somewhere between 10 to, in the worst events, 50% of the biosphere. And that would be the life on Earth. Now, it doesn't mean 10 to 50% of the species are gone. It just means that a lot of things die across the board. Pockets of survivors everywhere of almost all species. But
so these are changes
that's unfolding at this time, and it'll probably reach its pinnacle in our lifetimes.
And what does that look like? I mean, you were hinting at a magnetic pole shift.
Absolutely. So the magnetic poles have been shifting for quite some time. Coming with it is a weakening of the magnetic field. It is getting faster and faster, and it seems that as we are watching this take place, they are starting to recognize in some of the peer-reviewed scientific journals just what this means and just how fast some of these events were in the past. They used to think these things took, at the most rapid, 1,000 to 2,000 years. And just a couple of years ago, several studies, including a pretty well-known one from Berkeley, showed that these magnetic reversals can happen within a human lifetime, less than 100 years. We're over 100 years into this one. So this one's not breaking any records, but we are on this downward slope, and it really can kick into that higher gear where you put your hands up on the roller coaster and you're in free fall until you hit the thing and slide back back the other way. And that's basically where we're going. And this leaves us very vulnerable to space radiation. We're talking cell damage, DNA damage, electric fields that are able to be put through the planet that have a very serious effect on our health. And then it also has effects on the weather and the earthquakes. And when we get through there, there's no way our technological society will be around. Electronics will pretty much be toast once this event has happened because, they are all subject to electric currents, induction, and electrical damage. And that's basically something that's going to be happening to the entire surface of the planet.
You're getting into something that's really critical for people to understand. But let me back up and just give a little background. So for those of you watching, the magnetosphere is an invisible magnetic shield that is projected around the Earth by the movement of materials within the Earth. And by the way, correct me if I say anything wrong here, Ben, but I think so far I'm on track. So the magnetosphere causes ionizing radiation that would otherwise hit the surface of the Earth to be pushed around the outside of the Earth. So it's like a shield. It's like an invisible shield on a Star Trek spaceship. However, as Ben is talking about here, as the magnetosphere gets weaker and there's a magnetic pole shift that starts to happen, it opens up pockets of vulnerability through which solar radiation, ionizing radiation, can get through, and it could happen regionally, correct? Am I right about that, Ben?
It absolutely can, even as the global field in total is weakening as well. Like there's a pocket of very, very weak fields in the South Atlantic, and it's actually growing as the field weakens. It's now touching both Africa and South America at the same time.
Wow.
Deepening. And so, yes, there are, it is not a homogeneous, exact same all around the world. The strongest magnetic fields on the planet are at the exact south magnetic pole. Always will be the case. And right now I mentioned that the poles are shifting. What's interesting is when most people think of a shift, but a pole shift north and south, they picture these things staying on opposite sides of the planet, 12 and 6, 3 and 9. But they're actually coming to a meeting point. They're going to collide in the Indian Ocean. And the South Atlantic anomaly, that weak spot we just talked about, is on the exact opposite side of the planet as where the actual magnets are going.
Well, that makes sense, right? Because it's going to be weakest on the opposite side, since they're kind of, yeah.
It falls off over distance. Magnetism does.
Right. And so if someone were to look at a map of this, like colored hot spots of where more ionizing radiation is getting through, it would look like a tumultuous system of vortexes and circles and things like that, right? Almost like a fractal pattern or something. I mean, like you said, it's not homogeneous.
There's different risks that come with being in different, in what those different color patches would be. So if you are somewhere where the magnetic pole is getting close as it passes by, you have a good chance of getting more particle radiation, protons and other things like that. And, induction of electric currents. Whereas if you're in the South Atlantic anomaly, Africa, South America, those would be galactic cosmic rays and ultraviolet light. They just noticed, actually, finally, that there's an ozone hole in the tropics.
So when ionizing radiation gets through, obviously that causes chromosomal breaks and mutations in biological systems, not just humans, but other systems. But then, as you said, when other forms of radiation come through, it can cause induction in microcircuits and circuit boards, kind of like an EMP attack on electronics.
This radiation question is very much a hydra. And then you realize there's 4 hydras standing next to him, because it's not just birds that use the magnetic field to fly north and south. We're talking tons of marine creatures, big and small, not just in terms of their navigation, but knowing where to meet and reproduce and other things like that, where to go find food. There are danger escape behaviors in rabbits, in deer, that have been tied to geomagnetic activity. And there are just so many critical things. I mean, even in plants, if the magnetic fields are screwed up, a plant won't grow right.
Right.
And we're looking at an entire biosphere effect from just radiation and not having the magnetic field that we're used to as a planet. And we haven't even begun to talk about the weather or the earthquakes yet.
We're being told by the mainstream media that the only problem is carbon dioxide, climate change. But they won't talk about anything related to the sun. I mean, don't you find that fascinating that we're supposed to pretend almost that there is no sun? Except for the fact that there's daylight, I suppose. But they never talk about the sun or space weather or cosmic events or anything like that can affect us. Why do you think that is?
I think that there is a concerted effort to, no matter what, keep focus and blame on humans. Because if that's the case, they can make money off of it and they can avoid too much panic or fear, because if it's all our fault, we can do something about it. We can change. We'll change tomorrow.
Well, and if we can't change, don't worry. The government will come along and force you to change, right? And punish you.
Yes. Go down quite the rabbit hole there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so do you think that there are globalists right now, or maybe that's not the right term, but global leaders who are aware of how imminent a disaster is, and yet they're withholding that information from the public?
Yeah, but what's interesting is they are not withholding it to the point where they can hide it from the peer-reviewed journals. And if you're reading all of them, if you're paying attention to the data. Now, of course, if it's not your job to do that, that is a very challenging thing to do every day. Or you need to find somebody who's like, all right, fine, I'm going to do this for everybody else, which is what I do.
Right.
They don't acknowledge it, but at the same time, it almost feels like they want it to come out as well.
Huh.
Like they don't want it to cause panic, but they also want it to come out.
Now, of course, we can't control the changes in the magnetosphere. I mean, that's not, humans have nothing to do with what's going on with the magma and all the molten iron and everything inside the Earth, right? And also, of course, we can't change the sun. It is what it is. It's doing its own thing. So, and also we can't stop, giant meteors and space rocks and other things and exploding supernova. There's nothing we can do about that. Neutron stars and so on.
Only in their imaginations.
Right. So all we can control is making our society more resilient. And yet it seems like we're not. As a species, we're not doing that at all. We're making our society more vulnerable.
Here's something interesting. The more this information comes out, and I can tell you that 15 years ago, maybe 1,000 people cared about what the sun was doing on the entire planet. Now there's millions of people who know about the sun and the magnetic field and the pole shift. The only silver lining of the whole COVID thing was how many people have prepped now for the first time that didn't before. True. How many people went to the stores and had that feeling in their stomach when they realized there's nothing here. And this is a good smack to get hit with before the sun smacks you with it or before Earth's magnetic field fails on you.
Are you saying the planet
whole?
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to go ahead. There's a delay. You go, and then I'll follow.
The polls are showing something of a red wave coming in November. And whatever you think of that, it does mean more conservative thinking. And with that, you also see absolutely unfathomable demand for everything prep related. I don't know if you've tried to buy, freeze-dried food or anything like that, gear lately. Of course, you probably have connections, but it seems like there's delays in demand for everything. And it seems like there is, to some extent, maybe even if it's only a bigger, tiny fraction of the population, feels like the numbers are growing and more people are waking up, even while the other half of the population seems to be dancing further down the line of delusion.
Well, prepping is going mainstream, no question about it. And in fact, on the day that you and I are recording this, we had just released 1,700 sets of our Ranger Bucket storable food in our store. It just went live in the shopping cart. That's 62 pallets of food, and it all sold in 60 minutes. It was gone.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Well, no, actually, now we're dealing with angry people who are like, I didn't get it fast enough. What can you do to help me? And things like that. So prepping is going mainstream. We're trying to help as many people as we can. But as you said, getting back to space weather, it's like if we were to do a meme on this, planet Earth is Chris Rock and Will Smith is like a solar flare. he's about to bitch slap Earth hard with a solar flare. Now, we've talked about solar flares and the EMP effects. I mean, isn't it true that Earth is in a giant cosmic shooting gallery? There are flares all the time going off from the sun. It's just that most of them miss us because Earth is a very tiny target compared to all of space around the sun. Right?
I would say that more than half miss us. But most of the time, what hits us is just side effects, the peripheral effects of plasma that was blasted out, called a coronal mass ejection, or CME, they call them. And the issue is that most of them aren't that big. We have had several solar flares in the last couple of days, and they did put some stuff towards Earth. And I think probably towards the latter part of 2 or 3 days from whenever we're recording this, we're going to have some nice auroras in both hemispheres. But we're talking about something that's still 100 times weaker than what the sun does on a millennial scale, 1,000 times weaker than what it does on even longer time scales. And that's what is worrying, the bigger one. And then also the fact that we're not Chris Rock anymore because the magnetic field is going down. We're a 7-year-old girl. It's not Chris Rock up there. It's a 7-year-old girl.
Right, exactly. We're more vulnerable than ever before. I want to ask you about earthquakes. And now we have about 3 minutes left in this segment. Ask you about earthquakes. And then in the extended interview, I want to talk about crop failures and what that has to do with solar events. But tell us about earthquakes and volcanoes right now and the relationships with what's happening with space weather.
So the sun's magnetic fields, which are, they play a role in solar flares and magnetic storms. And as I mentioned, they're powerful enough. They stream all the way out past Pluto. When they interact with the Earth, it is pretty definitive that that's what triggers the biggest earthquakes. It's a situation where not all thumbs are fingers, but all fingers are thumbs. So not every time we get hit with it, do we have a megaquake, magnitude 8 or larger? But almost every magnitude 8 earthquake happens while we're getting hit with those powerful magnetic fields of the sun. And we will be, again, more and more vulnerable to this as our magnetic shield weakens as a planet.
I've read some studies before that talked about how a lot of quakes happen when the sun and the moon are on opposite sides of the Earth, or when they are on the same side. So there's some gravitational effects, but you're talking about something completely different, the electromagnetic effects. How does that cause the tectonic plates to shift?
Earth's magnetic field doesn't just come out of the poles and wrap around the planet. It does do that, but at the lower latitudes, there are these shells that come down at the tropics, littler and littler, kind of like Russian nesting dolls. And powerful magnetic events from the sun, powerful punches, can actually get through and actually push and excite the inner Van Allen belts. And that excitement can actually send that energy down into the lower latitudes. Wow. Now, when that happens, the place it is most likely to go are the fault lines. They are the most conductive. They have usually conductive water seeping through them. And inside of the Earth, not only is iron very reactive, but crystals and water are too. And the crust is much more saturated with crystals than most people realize, not to mention that oxygen is the most abundant element. Olivine, which is extremely reactive to electric current, it likes to literally jostle and then move upon, it jostles upon taking in current, and then on discharge, it moves. There are a lot of ways that this energy is triggering earthquakes. And, that's why the American Geophysical Union has a textbook on it now, on how, on pre-earthquake electromagnetic signals.
And for those who don't know, all quartz or various crystals, oxygen, O2, is part of the chemical lattice structure, like with silicon and oxygen. I think that's quartz, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And there's extreme magnetic properties to anything containing oxygen, because it's the reason water's a polar molecule. Right. And unfortunately, anything with fluoride in it actually is too.
We're talking about massive forces, electromagnetic fields that are ejected from the sun, that expand and envelop the Earth, and that then interact with the physical matter that makes up Earth's crust and fault lines and plates and so on.
Absolutely. And here's something else to think about. That's just those particles in the little shells. That induction we were talking about earlier, with modern day non-kill shot level storms, they already notice electric current induced into the mantle.
And the sun is, that giant nuclear fusion machine in the sky. Well, and fission, I suppose. Totally unpredictable, many times larger than the Earth, hundreds of times larger. And it's ejecting energy at us all the time. So, Ben, we're going to wrap up this segment here on Brighteon.tv, but stay with us. We'll do an extended interview here on the other side. For those of you watching, we've been interviewing Ben Davidson. Suspicious Observers is the name of the YouTube channel, and you can also check out his website at suspiciousobservers.org. And feel free to repost this interview. Thank you for watching today on Brighteon.tv. We'll have the extended version of this on Brighteon.com. Thanks for watching. Okay, Ben, this is now the extended interview. Thanks for hanging out. Let's talk about crop failures and, really weather extremes, because right now the western United States is in a severe drought. We're already seeing alarm bells ringing about, let's say, for example, the cotton yields in western Texas are going to be affected. Crops are being devastated. Water supplies devastated throughout, Nevada, Arizona, California, and so on. While China is having extreme floods, and the floods are ruining their food supply. So we're having global food scarcity based on weather extremes. Talk to us about the links with space weather and solar activity, please.
So with what's happening with both the sun and Earth's magnetic situation combined. We are looking at what I can only call a wonkier jet stream. More of this, not as much of this. And that's what brings these, hey, it's 30 degrees above average today. Whoa, that was a thunderstorm tonight. And then is it really just 12 hours later, 20 degrees below normal here?
Right.
Those extreme swings that we're noticing, this is what's going to be getting worse and worse and happening more and more often. The droughts are going to get worse and last longer. The floods are going to get worse and be more devastating, be more widespread, things like that. Amazingly, while there will be both unexpected heat and cold associated, most of the unexpected heat that is capable of damaging the crops won't be in the daytime. It'll be at nighttime, and it won't actually damage the crops. It's amazing. Like 75% of what they chart as global warming is nighttime temperatures not dropping as low. Everybody thinks global warming, how hot is it at noon? Well, no, you have to look over 24 hours. And literally 75% of it is those night hours. It's just not quite dipping as low. That's 75% of global warming right there. But those cold events, people should not be planting early right now.
Yeah, the cold events, last year in Texas, we had that crazy freeze that was just insane, took down the whole power grid. So there's something where what you're talking about, changes in the jet stream, that was a polar ice, blast. It just came all the way down through Texas and even northern Mexico. And that took out the power grid. I mean, talk about real effects. Boom, there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's hilarious. I have seen people try to pin that on global warming. And
it's so cold, it must be warming. Yeah, right.
It's so hard not to laugh when you're supposed to be in an apropos, nose to the sky academic situation, just to not laugh at somebody on stage. But, look, so there is a mechanism for global warming to create a little more snow. There is no mechanism for these psychotic cold events. And if you were to do something like go to a search engine and type in record cold, click news, and then toggle last 24 hours, you're going to find something every single day. There are record colds somewhere on the planet every single day. It's amazing. There's record heat as well. It's all kinds of climate extremes.
Well, right. But, the conventional system has declared war on carbon dioxide. And CO2, I mean, I've talked about this a lot. CO2 is the single most important molecule, I think, for life on our planet, for the biosphere. The plants need it. And of course, all the animals that depend on plants need it, including us. And it's very low. It's only, 408 parts per million in the atmospheric chemistry at the moment. So if we had higher CO2, crop yields would be higher and the planet would be wetter. Right. It'd be more like a greenhouse. Right.
Yeah. There's a reason they pump CO2 into a greenhouse. The plants on this planet have been starving for approximately 4 million years, if I'm remembering that correctly. The plants have kind of been starving for millions of years. That's why most of the plants on this planet are extinct. Most of them needed much more than what's in the atmosphere right now.
Well, right. And that's why we have more deserts than we could have. If you raise CO2,
definitely,
the deserts become farmland or potential for farmland, and the rainforests become more diverse and more successful, and they begin to spread and expand. And also higher levels of CO2 would bring more rainfall. But again, it's what's so shocking in all of this is how we're just being brainwashed into blaming the wrong thing while being distracted from the thing that really, really matters, which is what's going on with the sun, frankly, and Earth's magnetic fields, as you're talking about.
Well, and from a climatological perspective, we're going to lose our electrified way of life. We're going to lose the coastlines. It's not going to be fantastic to be outside at noon or midnight. And on top of that, growing food is going to get more challenging.
Yeah.
The entire food chain, top to bottom, is going to be stressed.
Really important point you just made, because it's the weather sustainability, or the stability of weather that allows food to be grown reliably, right?
The predictability of it.
Right, and a lot of the crops, let's say citrus crops in Florida, if those trees get frozen 1 year, you might not be able to get crops back for 8 or 10 years, because you have to plant all new trees, right? And it's not like growing, potatoes where you can just get it next year. It's like it's another decade now.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to propagate an orange? It doesn't work.
No, I've not tried that, but I
haven't either. I just know it doesn't work.
Well, I've known about macadamia nut farms. I visited one in Hawaii that they decided to spray glyphosate all over the farm to keep the weeds down. They killed every mac nut tree on the farm, and those take like 20 years or something to start really producing. So, the wipeout lasts for sometimes decades.
Yeah. I think that it's fair to say, and here's what's interesting. No matter how much devastation there is in terms of agriculture, there is somebody somewhere who's going to get a bumper crop, because it's never terrible everywhere.
That's right.
I think we're going to see shifts away from 1,000 different options to there's a limited supply of a limited number of options.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
And none of it's cheap.
Right. The crop failures make everything a lot more expensive in terms of what it costs at the grocery store, if you even have the variety there anymore. But a lot of the crops are very fragile, and then we're suffering the fertilizer scarcity because of the situation with Russia and Ukraine right now. So a lot of farmers aren't even planting at this moment, right now in North America, for example, not even planting.
That's so crazy. There's so clearly going to be a food shortage or a massive spike in food prices. And not only are we still paying 30 some million acres of farmland not to be farmed, but there are farmers who just aren't doing it because of the cost of fuel, the cost of seed, the cost of fertilizer. Right.
Well, how do you explain that? The USDA has been paying farmers to destroy crops. Right. I mean, how do you not realize that this is some kind of deliberate scarcity scenario here?
Yeah. This is, it feels like a planned implosion.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like a planned implosion. So how do people protect themselves from all of this? What's your advice on that?
Be faster than 16 minutes late to your offering of prepping supplies. Let's go back to something I mentioned earlier, because I don't think I can give your viewers any lessons on prepping necessarily, unless, I come back sometime and we want to talk about where in the world you might want to be during the disaster, because it's not so easy to pick up your family, pick up your life and go. But
right.
Psychological prepping. Those people who went to the store, who are complete zombies, who went to the store and then realized what was happening, even if it was for a ridiculous reason, they now know what that is. And they might spot these things coming. Not being a deer in the headlights, executing a plan, having that plan, having practiced that plan. These are things that can really make or break what happens between your ears when there is an emergency and you actually need to be strong for yourself, for your family, for your children, things like that.
Yeah.
If you can do 1,000 push-ups, but you're a snowflake up here, I may be eating you in the disaster.
Oh, yeah. Well, Soylent Green, I guess, is always the last option for humanity. But
it's the last option, but things could get bad, Mike.
I'm even thinking about agriculture, how automated and mechanized it is today, and how much the tractors depend on circuit boards, and even irrigation systems require pumps with metering systems and complex software, embedded code. And I'm thinking, man, when that stuff goes down, you're not going to be able to grow food at all unless you have some kind of low-tech ancient system.
It's as bad as you think and probably worse. And here's the ironically terrible part of it all. There are the people here to take the place of those machines tomorrow, but they're in banks, but they're in skyscrapers, but they're flipping burgers, but they're playing video games, or they're doing nothing. They're arguing in courtrooms, you know? When this happens, a lot of life goes away. What do you do with all those people? Could you imagine if there was some way to snap your fingers and be like, you people who have nothing to do with this anymore, whose entire existence is gone. I have a way for you to do something. I have a way for you to contribute here. Because, yeah, okay, a machine goes down, fine. What if you have 100 people to take its place? Yeah, okay, there are machines that are more effective than 100 people, but 100 people are 100 people. And
but you also have, you know, culturally and even physically, as you know, someone can't just overnight become a farmer. They don't have the strength or the stamina. And human power is the hardest way to live, right? And that's why they use animals. You know, you'd rather plow a field with a giant oxen or a couple of horses, right, than have to do it yourself. You'd probably die of starvation just trying to plant your crop, you know?
Well, see, the thing is, there's also enough farmers and enough knowledge that if you could somehow, again, snap your fingers and spread them in an oversight role, it would work. But again, of course, we're talking about, this is the irony. We have gone to this non-natural, electro-dependent way of life, and it's about to be taken away from us.
Yeah, right. Here's you know, this is why I'm such an advocate of low-tech prepping, or even no-tech prepping, as I call it. But one thing that got my attention is, you know, I buy old John Deere tractors that were built in the 1970s. And the reason I do that is because the modern tractors run on software, and the software has to talk to the servers in the cloud at the johndeere.com server farm. And then they turn off your tractor if you don't have the latest software update. And I'm like, F that, man. I turn the key. I want that sucker to start.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I love the old diesel stuff. I actually just got an old diesel telehandler, because I'm going to have a bunch of stuff delivered to our ranch here that we're building out. But, you know, it's old. It's not pretty, but it works. It's diesel.
That's right.
Worst comes to worst, I'll pour Crisco in it if I can't find any diesel, and it'll run all day.
Yeah, I know. There's going to be a lot of spare vegetable oil available when the fast food industry collapses from a lack of food. It's going to be free for the taking, man. All right, so look, we're getting close to running out of time here on this show. We've covered a lot of topics, but there's a sense of, I get the feeling that you're kind of speechless on some of this. Like, it's hard even for you to describe what's coming to the audience in the short time that we have here. It's like, it's hard for people to get their head around this.
Yeah. So every 1,500 years, the sun puts out one of its smaller super flares. It injects so much energy into the earth, a ton of ice melts at the polar region. It freshens the ocean, chills the ocean, which chills the atmosphere at the same time as ocean heat transport shuts down. Basically, the movie The Day After Tomorrow. And it corrects the heating from the solar flare back to where we are. Every fourth harmonic of this cycle is called a Heinrich event every 6,000 years. This has so much heat, melts so much ice, that it causes too much cooling, and it actually cools back below the baseline. And then we climb back up. Every 12,000 years, it is so bad that we get a spike down, and there is a several decades long ice age type thing. This would be what happened at the Younger Dryas. We were at 12,000 years ago. We were on our way out of the last ice age. and boom, right back down into it. Suddenly, boom.
So where are we now in these events? Like what's the next thing that's coming?
Well, you might know 12,000 is 2 of 6,000. So the double harmonic of the Heinrich event is the great catastrophe cycle, where the magnetic field reverses 2. And it's climate chaos, radiation chaos, food chain chaos from amoeba and bacteria to lion and human. And all in the middle of a hurricane while you can't stand up because the ground is shaking beneath you. And you can't call for help because there's nobody to call and the phones don't work. And there's no heat or electricity and your car doesn't work. And there's no food at the store. There's no ATM. There's no gas station.
So that's a global 90% die-off of the human race, probably, right there.
Humans are not going to do so well. There are people who are going to survive.
Right.
There are definitely people who will, but like I said, we are going to lose all the coastlines in this event. All the coastlines.
And when was the last time that this 12,000 year event occurred?
12,000 years ago.
Oh boy. Okay. That's, well, okay. Try to put a smiley face on that one, folks. Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Unless the magnetic field is weakening and the magnetic poles are shifting faster and faster, you don't have to worry.
But that is happening.
We are perfectly due for this. All the signs are happening. And from the magnetic field to the top of the atmosphere to crustal and magnetic anomalies deep at the core, they are finding evidence that we are in it. We are about to have this right now. But it's a solar system shift. The entire solar system is shifting. It's not just the Earth and the sun that are linked up on the cycle.
Right.
The entire solar system is on this. And to watch it happen on the other planets and on the sun, all change just in lockstep with the Earth, is often leaving one without words to adequately describe it. Yes.
So one last question, and then we got to wrap this up. Some of the other guests I've interviewed have said that the COVID depopulation plan and now the food weaponization depopulation plan and other depopulation plans are all being carried out because globalists know that something massive is coming that will drastically reduce the human carrying capacity of planet Earth. And they're almost trying to euthanize the human population in advance of that event as a means of reducing human suffering or something. I don't know how they justify it. Go ahead.
Well, lack of competition in the aftermath, lack of a chance somebody's going to eat their food, lack of a chance somebody's going to eat them. They want, they know that there's not going to be a ton of humans left, but only some of that is going to come from nature. The rest of that will be us. Desperation, devolution into pain and hunger and rage. An interesting thing happened in one of the most impressive books about this, and there have been dozens of studies to back up the general foundational concept that emotional instability, even things from emotional instability all the way up to acts of terror, are correlated with these strong magnetic of storms on the planet Earth. They subjected a number of mice to a no magnetic environment, what we will experience as the field reverses. Immediately, the mice began cannibalizing and raping each other relentlessly.
In other words, okay.
So we are talking about our brains basically being blasted with all different kinds of energy, our bodies blasted with all different kinds of energy, while every comfort and thing that we know around us crumbles.
So basically, the whole world turns into whatever's on Hunter Biden's laptop, is what you're saying. like the worst possible outcome for humanity and immorality. Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, Ben. That's a shocking image, but obviously we're going to have to talk again soon. And can I ask you something? You have the contact with my coordinator for these interviews. We need to get you on in an urgent situation when something big happens that you want to bring to us. Can you reach out with like a red alert, red flag alert if something big starts to happen, and we can get you on right away?
Yeah, I think I could probably do that.
Well, we would definitely appreciate that. The people would appreciate it. Not that, if the big one comes, there's not much we can do about it, but people do want to be informed and understand what's happening. So anything you could do to help.
Having a few hours notice can be life or death.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely true. All right. Well, Ben, this has been fascinating and a little bit horrifying as well, but I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. We'll talk again soon. And I want to encourage people to visit your channel on YouTube. It's Suspicious Observers. I hope start posting those videos up on Brighteon.com too, if you would. I think some people have been cross-posting your videos, but we'd love for you to post there. And your website is suspiciousobservers.org. So thank you, Ben. It's been fascinating.
Pleasure. Thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Be safe. And for those of you watching, feel free to repost this interview on your own channels on YouTube or other platforms as well. And check out Suspicious Observers because it's really fascinating information. And thank you, Ben. It's been real interesting talking with you here. Thank you all for watching. I'm Mike Adams, of course, Brighteon.com, the uncensored free speech video platform, so we can have conversations just like this one. Everybody be safe. Take care. Survival Nutrition is our new free audiobook that you can download right now from survivalnutrition.com. In this nearly 8-hour audiobook, you will learn life-saving secrets of how to use food, nutrients, plant molecules, trace minerals, and chemical compounds to save your life, even in a total collapse scenario. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and I'm the author of Survival Nutrition. I founded and run a multi-million-dollar food science laboratory, and I'm the author of the best-selling science book, Food Forensics. I'm also a prepper, a patriot, and a survivalist. I can teach you how to survive what's coming by growing your own food, medicine, and antibiotics that can help keep you healthy and alive, even during the worst of times. At survivalnutrition.com, you'll be able to instantly download the full free audiobook as MP3 files. Keep a copy of all these files on your local hard drive and print out the full guide, just in case we lose the power grid. survivalnutrition.com.